Acclaimed foreign correspondent Peter Godwin was born and raised in Zimbabwe. He's written for the New York Times, Vanity Fair, many more. He's a documentary maker, and his books about Zimbabwe include The Fear, Robert Mugabe, and the martyrdom of Zimbabwe. I spoke to him as the country was still alive with that celebration, that beautiful sense of being suddenly free that Fergal Keane so wonderfully captured. And I asked him, after the euphoria, in the cold light of day, how different from Robert Mugabe will Emmerson Mnangagwa really be?
This isn't a kind of people's revolution. This is essentially a handing of the baton, between members of the ruling party, from Robert Mugabe to his erstwhile bagman, consigliere, enforcer, Emmerson Mnangagwa, who's been at his side for more than 40 years and who, in many respects, has as much or more blood on his hands, more moral opprobrium attached to him than Mugabe does. So, no, I mean, on the face of it, one doesn't necessarily want to dance on the street. However, it is a measure of just how desperate Zimbabweans are for change, for any change, after 37 years of the same bloke at the top, this sort of dead hand, the stasis that's affected the country, that just having Mugabe out is such a bloody relief. Everybody's just so, it is spontaneous in that respect. And I suspect that, what Mnangagwa will probably try and do is to present himself as this new, this new leader of ZANU-PF 2.0, ZANU-PF light, if you like, as a reformer and a kind of technocrat and, et cetera, et cetera. They're trying to hang on. They're trying to reinvent themselves to survive.
Is that persuasive? Is that repackaging of ZANU-PF persuasive? And you talk about passing the baton from Mugabe to Mnangagwa. The people doing the passing are the military, and fundamentally they are the same generals, aren't they, who were propping Mugabe up?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's just as well to remind everybody that, Zimbabwe is a country which depends on a superstructure of political violence. That's how these people have stayed in power, right from the beginning, from the early 80s when Mugabe sent the North Korean trained 5th Brigade down into the southwest of the country, into Matabeleland, to kill more than 20,000 civilians. And, by the way, who was his intelligence chief at the time? None other than Emmerson Mnangagwa. From that time all the way through, they had a one-party state for a while, so there was no political opposition. As soon as the political opposition reappeared in the very late 1990s with Morgan Tsvangirai and the MDC, there was political violence again, and they tortured people, very badly tortured people in the elections of 2008, which they lost, in fact, in the first round. And ditto in the 2013 elections were stolen as well. So, these guys are very skilled now at political violence. It's what keeps them in power.
I want to look forward, but in order to do that, I want to look back to that period after the election in 2008 that you were just describing, a period known as the Fear. Now, you very bravely, because journalists were banned and at considerable risk, you very bravely during that period re-entered Zimbabwe then. As you say, ZANU-PF, Mugabe had lost the election and he was in the process of putting that right. What was it like then, and does that explain why people are dancing in the streets now?
Absolutely. I mean, the violence was horrific. I mean, there was something about it. It was so personal in nature. What they did was they realized by then that if they killed lots and lots of people, it would finally trigger international intervention of some sort or opprobrium of some sort. And so they did a thing which we started to call politicide, in the sense that it's below genocide. You're not killing hundreds or even thousands of people, but you're torturing. It was torture on an industrial scale, and it was done from a script, because all the people I talked to, they told the same stories. The beats of the stories were exactly the same. They were very badly tortured, but their torturers were quite careful not to kill them. They were very, very badly and gorily tortured. And then it was done on a catch and release basis. They were then released back into their home villages. And these people were sort of low to medium level opposition party officials. They were released back to their villages, limping or taken in wheelbarrows or whatever. And there they functioned as sort of gory billboards, pour encourager les autres, to show people that this is what happens if you oppose the regime. And you only have to do that so many times.
Yes.
For it to elicit a Pavlovian response in people. They know that you're going to do it, they're terrified.
So, if Mnangagwa was very much part of that process, if the same generals who were there then are still there now, if the dancing in the streets is more about relief at the departure of Mugabe than a heartfelt hope for some great new order, what is it Zimbabweans are in fact hoping for now? What is the best possible scenario for the people who are dancing as we speak?
I think what may well happen is that ZANU-PF what they're trying to achieve is to manage transition, to manage change, to move from one leader to the other, but keep their system basically intact. The other problem they face is the economy is sort of going south again. Zimbabwe is already a failed state, but it's going back into an inflationary spiral. There's shortages, etc. They have to attend to that, and so I think that they do actually. They may well decide that their best chance for survival is to make some reforms, but not enough reforms to actually kind of legislate themselves out of power. Now, it's possible that in the next few days and weeks you'll see Mnangagwa, when he has to form a new cabinet, you'll see him reach out to some opposition members and even to some people who aren't in any political party, people who are sort of technocrats who are good managers. That's entirely possible. He's going to rule until the end of what would have been the end of Mugabe's term. In other words, mid-2018. They'll have to figure out when they do the next elections. But they may well lose control of this. For example, you saw the scenes in Harare and in the rest of Zimbabwe where the army, which has facilitated what is, in a sense, they kind of umpired or helped to manage this movement between one ZANU-PF leader to another. But everybody was hailing them as heroes and jumping up on their APCs, having selfies taken, and all that kind of thing. And it's quite possible that these soldiers are young men. They're in their early 20s. They've just been in their barracks. These guys haven't seen much action, and all of a sudden they're being hailed as heroes. And it's kind of a cool thing, a cool thing to have happen to you. And it's possible that it might actually change the way they behave, and that they decide they don't want to be an oppressive force. They don't want to take part in that system anymore. So there are a number of ways that ZANU-PF could lose control of this beast.
What sort of state of the opposition in? That was very evocative, your description of the fear period in 2008. The opposition, functionaries and politicians and middle-grade party supporters being returned to their homes, having been tortured to near death in wheelbarrows. 9 years on, what kind of nick is the opposition in?
It's in terrible nick. I mean, it's fractured, it's split, it's divided, it's infiltrated by spies, it has no money. There's infighting. It's in terrible nick. And, in a sense, I mean, this is the irony of what's going on. In a sense, this is the best time for ZANU-PF to be having its own internal meltdown because the opposition is so fractured. I mean, that if ZANU-PF got their act together, they might even actually win a free and fair election. I mean, I somewhat doubt it, but if the vote is split enough ways, it's quite possible that could happen. So it's in bad condition at the moment, and what they need to do is get together and, put together a coalition, or at the very least they've got to agree not to compete with each other in certain constituencies so that they don't let ZANU-PF come in through a minority of votes.
It's Peter Godwin, a Zimbabwean author. If you are interested in why people were dancing in the streets, his book, The Fear, Robert Mugabe and the Martyrdom of Zimbabwe, will give you an extraordinary insight into what happened in that period around the elections in 2008.